Rachel Simmons, a black billionaire real estate mogul, steps into the Plaza Center, a luxurious shopping haven known for its exclusivity. But as she demands the VIP treatment she was promised, the staff dismisses her, assuming she doesn't belong. With steely determination, Rachel takes control of the situation, but she's here to dismantle a system that excludes people like her. What happens next will shock you. But before we dive into the full story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future stories. Rachel Simmons stood tall, a force to be reckoned with in the real estate world. Her black Bentley glided to a smooth stop in front of the Plaza Center, the luxurious shopping hub that defined exclusivity in the heart of the city. The driver opened her door and she stepped out with the grace of someone who had walked this path countless times before. Every step measured, every movement deliberate. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor, reverberating through the otherwise quiet space. The cold breeze tugged at her perfectly tailored black suit, but she didn't flinch. The chill was nothing compared to the steely determination in her gaze. Anna, her longtime assistant, stepped out behind her, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings with a mix of wariness and anticipation. Rachel's presence demanded attention, and today she was here to remind them all of who she was. As she adjusted the lapels of her suit, Rachel allowed herself a moment to observe the Plaza Center's grand entrance. Gold fixtures gleamed in the low light of the late afternoon, and the glass doors gleamed like a facade, inviting only those deemed worthy. But Rachel knew better. She had been invited into spaces like these, and she had walked out of them too, on her own terms. "Stay focused," Anna whispered, sensing the tension in Rachel's posture. She could feel the storm brewing behind Rachel's calm exterior. Still looking away, she opened her eyes to look at me. Rachel's lips twitched into a barely perceptible smile, her confidence unwavering. "They don't know what's coming," she muttered, her voice low but laced with an undeniable edge. She was no stranger to the ways in which the world often underestimated her, not just because she was a woman in a male-dominated industry, but because of the color of her skin. Rachel Simmons was a billionaire real estate mogul, known for her sharp business acumen and her ability to turn around struggling properties into vibrant, profitable ventures. She had built her empire from the ground up, facing hurdles that would have toppled many others. From the streets where she grew up to the high-stakes boardrooms where she negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, Rachel had always been the outsider, but now she was the one making the rules. Despite her immense success, the world around her still tried to impose limits. It was one of the reasons she had come to Plaza Center today. They thought they could dismiss her as just another wealthy client, one who would walk in, make a purchase, and leave quietly. But Rachel wasn't interested in playing by their rules. No, today, she was here for something much more than a shopping experience. She was here to disrupt. As she moved forward, her eyes locked on the glass doors, now opening in front of her. She felt the familiar sting of judgment, the glances from the staff, the hidden disdain in their eyes. She knew they couldn't fathom her presence here in their exclusive space. But she would change that, just as she had done with every other challenge in her life. Rachel adjusted her stride, commanding the attention of everyone in her path, and entered the Plaza Center with a silent promise. Today, she would take what was hers. The Plaza Center's grand interior exuded luxury from every angle. Gold fixtures lined the walls, gleaming under the soft ambient lighting. The pristine white marble floors stretched across the vast space, reflecting the glow of extravagant glass chandeliers that hung like delicate sculptures above. Yet, despite the opulence that filled the air, an invisible tension hung over the place, a coldness that seeped into every corner. Rachel could feel it the moment she entered, an undercurrent of judgment, a subtle dismissal of her presence. She moved deeper into the mall, her eyes scanned the employees and shoppers, noticing the slight shifts in body language. The staff's cold glares were not just fleeting. They lingered on her, filled with disbelief and silent disdain. It was as though her very existence in this space, with its polished walls and exclusive clientele, challenged the status quo. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble, echoing in the quiet space as she made her way toward the front desk. It wasn't the first time she had felt this way, but today it stung more than usual. She approached the receptionist, who, despite her professionally neat appearance, couldn't entirely mask the thin veneer of disdain that crept across her face. The woman offered a tight, forced smile, her eyes scanning Rachel in that way that made it clear she didn't belong here, at least not in the way she expected. "Good afternoon, how can I assist you?" The receptionist's voice was polite, but there was no warmth in it. It was transactional, mechanical. Rachel didn't flinch. She knew how these encounters went. Her calm demeanor barely shifted as she spoke, the tension simmering beneath her words. "I'm Rachel Simmons, and I have a VIP reservation for today. We require the private dressing room and personal assistance services." The receptionist's eyes flickered to the screen before her, fingers tapping impatiently at the keyboard, then back to Rachel, the smile still frozen. She cleared her throat, her tone now colder than before. "I'm afraid the VIP room is unavailable. You can use the communal dressing room." Rachel's gaze remained steady, but inside a flicker of disbelief sparked. She had confirmed the reservation hours earlier, and this was not how things were supposed to go. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to absorb the sting of the receptionist's dismissal, but she quickly masked it, shifting her stance as she locked eyes with Anna, who was standing just behind her. Anna's jaw was clenched, her fists visibly tightening as she fought to hold back her anger. Rachel could feel the wave of frustration radiating from her assistant, but she knew better than to let emotions take the lead. Rachel's voice remained measured, though the edge of authority was clear. "This is unacceptable. I need to speak to your manager." The receptionist hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but quickly nodded. Rachel could tell that this wasn't the first time someone had asked for a higher authority to intervene. Still, there was something about this moment that gnawed at her, a reminder that in spaces like this, despite all her success and wealth, she was still an outsider. As they waited for the manager to arrive, the cold stares from the staff continued. The mall, with all its polished surface and gilded luxury, felt more alienating than ever. Rachel's pulse quickened, but her face remained composed. She had dealt with worse before. And yet, something about today felt different. Anna leaned closer, her voice low and filled with restrained fury. "This is ridiculous, Rachel. We've got to do something about this. It's like they don't even see you." Rachel's eyes flickered toward Anna, her calm smile not reaching her eyes. "I know, but let's see how they handle the truth when it comes." She turned back to face the receptionist, who now seemed to be moving slower, as though avoiding eye contact. Rachel wasn't going to let this go. Not now, not today. Anna could feel the pressure mounting, the tension in the air thick enough to cut through with a knife. Rachel's calm was an armor she wore well, but Anna, ever the protector, could sense the shift in the room, the subtle hostility that came with being underestimated, ignored. She could see it in the way the receptionist's eyes darted around, avoiding Rachel's gaze, as if her presence alone was enough to unsettle them. Without hesitation, Anna stepped forward, her posture stiff with determination. The silent force that usually accompanied Rachel's presence was now embodied in Anna's words. She had seen Rachel face discrimination more times than she could count, but today was different. Today, they would not back down. Her voice was sharp, every syllable deliberate, each word a challenge. "We confirm this reservation in advance. Please check again." The receptionist's eyes flickered nervously to the screen before returning to the two women standing before her. The lines of her face tightened, and her fingers tapped the keyboard with growing impatience. She was doing everything she could to ignore the mounting discomfort in the room. The seconds stretched out, stretching the tension like a taut string ready to snap. After what seemed like an eternity, the receptionist looked back at them, a barely concealed frustration creeping into her expression. "I don't see anything under Simmons today. Maybe there's been a mistake." Anna's eyes narrowed, her patience evaporating. She opened her mouth, ready to demand an explanation, but Rachel's voice cut through the simmering anger, calm, yet underlined with an unmistakable strength. "I need to speak to your manager. I am certain this is an error." Rachel's words had an impact. The receptionist flinched slightly, not because of the tone, but because of the quiet authority that accompanied them. Rachel wasn't asking, she wasn't pleading. She was asserting her right to be treated with respect. For a fleeting moment, the receptionist faltered, caught off guard by the directness of Rachel's request. But then she quickly masked her surprise, forcing a professional mask back into place. "Of course," she muttered, a hint of reluctance in her voice as she gestured toward the hallway. "Please, wait here." Rachel nodded, her gaze never leaving the receptionist's face. The cool indifference in her expression was a reminder that, despite their best efforts, this moment was far from over. Anna, standing close by, could feel her pulse quicken. This wasn't just about a room reservation. It was about something deeper, something more personal. They were making a stand today, not just for Rachel, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small, overlooked, or out of place. As the receptionist disappeared into the back office to fetch the manager, Rachel took a breath, her shoulders still squared, her gaze unwavering. Anna glanced at her, the sharp edge of worry in her eyes softened by the quiet resolve she saw in Rachel's. She was a master of playing the long game, and Anna knew that today would be no different. "I'm sure this'll get sorted," Rachel said softly, her voice carrying an air of finality. "But let's make sure they understand the consequences of their mistake." Anna clenched her fists at her sides, trying to hold back the torrent of anger bubbling beneath her surface. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep quiet, but for now, she followed Rachel's lead, ready for whatever came next. The manager would be their next test, but Anna knew better than to doubt Rachel's ability to navigate even the toughest situations. As the minutes passed, the tension in the air only grew. It was a waiting game now, and Rachel was never one to lose at that. No. The door to the back office swung open, and the manager, Richard Jones, stepped into the waiting area. His sharp suit and pressed trousers screamed of high-end tailoring, but his stiff posture and the slight arch of his brow spoke volumes. Rachel immediately assessed him, middle-aged, with a kind of polished arrogance that came from years of being in charge. Surrounded by the comfort of privilege, he moved with the slow confidence of someone used to being in control, but Rachel could see the flicker of discomfort in his eyes as they briefly scanned her. She noticed the subtle shift in his gaze as it moved from her designer suit to her face, and then, briefly, to her skin color. It was enough to make her feel the weight of the unspoken judgment hanging in the air, though he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Good afternoon," he said with practiced politeness, though his tone lacked the warmth of genuine hospitality. "I'm Richard Jones, manager of Plaza Center. How can I help you?" Rachel maintained her composure, her face a mask of calm resolve. But inwardly, a quiet disappointment settled over her. This was the moment she had anticipated, and the reality of it wasn't quite what she had hoped. She wasn't surprised, though. It was always the same. Likely, she liked her face to reflect the tone she worked hard to. "Welcome home," she said. "I'm Rachel Simmons," she said, her voice steady, though there was a quiet edge to it that betrayed her frustration. "I made a VIP reservation for today, but it seems there's a misunderstanding. I expected the room and services as promised." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly as she spoke, studying her intently. It wasn't just a look of professional curiosity. It was a subtle appraisal, as if trying to gauge her worth in the context of his exclusive world. His gaze lingered a beat too long before he finally responded, his tone shifting, now colder. "Unfortunately," he began, his words smooth but pointed, "the VIP room is unavailable." He paused, clearly enjoying the tension building in the air. "Perhaps your request doesn't align with our current offerings." Rachel's expression faltered for a moment, the sting of his words sharp, but she quickly masked it. She could feel Anna's presence beside her, the unspoken fury bubbling beneath the surface. Anna's fists clenched again, and Rachel could sense her ready to erupt at any moment. But Rachel, ever composed, held the silence between them like a well-placed chess move. This was her moment, and she wouldn't let it slip away. With a slow breath, Rachel spoke again, her voice laced with quiet strength. "I'm certain there's been a mistake," she said, each word chosen deliberately. "I made this reservation well in advance, and I expect the services to be honored as agreed upon." The air between them seemed to crackle, a charged stillness before the next exchange. Richard's gaze flickered again, this time with a trace of annoyance. He didn't appreciate being questioned, especially in front of his staff, but Rachel wasn't interested in playing his game. She wasn't here for apologies or hollow explanations. She was here for respect, and that was non-negotiable. Richard cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "I understand your frustration, but our policies—" Rachel's voice interrupted him, smooth but firm. "I need to speak to someone who can resolve this issue immediately. I'm not here for excuses. I'm here for the services that were promised to me." Anna, standing behind Rachel, took in a sharp breath, her eyes flashing. She knew Rachel well enough to understand that when she spoke like this, there was no going back. It wasn't just about a VIP room. It was about making sure they understood that Rachel Simmons didn't just walk into places. She owned them. Richard's lips tightened as he shifted his weight, a silent moment of hesitation before he gestured to the receptionist, signaling for her to bring out whatever documentation they had. But Rachel wasn't looking for paperwork. She was looking for accountability. "This won't be the last time we speak about this," Rachel added, her voice calm but filled with a steely promise. "And I won't accept being disregarded because of something as trivial as a room reservation." Rachel's gaze remained fixed on Richard Jones, her eyes narrowing just slightly as she took in the full weight of the situation. Beneath the forced politeness, the subtle disdain was palpable. It wasn't just about the VIP room, it was the way he looked at her, the way he dismissed her presence, and the way he had almost convinced himself that she didn't belong in his world. The contempt was hidden behind a veneer of professionalism, but it was there nonetheless. A storm began to brew within Rachel, a feeling she had grown familiar with over the years, a tight, seething anger that urged her to act. It was the same anger that had fueled her rise in the cutthroat world of real estate, the same anger that had driven her to build an empire in spite of the odds. But today was different. She had learned long ago that reacting impulsively, letting that anger dictate her next move, only played into the hands of those who sought to undermine her. No, today she would stay calm. She would remain in control. Taking a deep breath, she stepped back, her movements deliberate, composed. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here to make a statement, and she knew exactly how to play the long game. Without breaking eye contact with Richard, Rachel spoke, her voice cold and steady, as though the entire situation no longer held any weight for her. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Jones," she said, her words measured but sharp. "I'll leave now." There was no anger in her tone, only the quiet certainty of someone who knew she had already won the battle. Richard's expression flickered, surprise, perhaps a little confusion, but no apology. He had underestimated her, and now she was leaving on her own terms, with her dignity intact. Behind her, Anna's fists clenched at her sides. Rachel could feel the fury radiating from her assistant, who had been a silent witness to the dismissive treatment. Anna couldn't stand seeing Rachel treated this way, and her voice, filled with the raw edge of frustration, broke the silence that had settled over them. "This is ridiculous." Anna nearly spat the words out. "We need to go public with this. Call a lawyer, get the press involved." Her eyes were wide, her anger barely contained as she paced behind Rachel. She had always been protective of Rachel, and this incident felt like a personal insult. The desire for immediate retribution was almost too much to resist. Rachel held up a hand, signaling for Anna to stop. Her calm, measured tone cut through the air, grounding Anna in the moment. "No, Anna," Rachel said firmly, the strength in her voice undeniable. "This won't be the first time, nor the last. Reacting impulsively would be their victory, not ours." Anna paused, her jaw tightening, the fire still burning in her chest. She could feel Rachel's unwavering resolve, but the idea of letting this go, of walking away without a fight, was hard to accept. However, she knew better than to argue when Rachel was in this state of mind. She could see the calculation in Rachel's eyes, the quiet power that always surfaced when she was faced with injustice. Rachel was a master of strategy, and she wouldn't allow herself to be swept up in emotional reactions. Anna clenched her fists once more, but the fight drained out of her, replaced by a reluctant understanding. Rachel was right. This was not the time to act on impulse. Instead, they would play the long game, just as Rachel had always done. It wasn't about winning the battle, it was about winning the war. Rachel turned on her heel, motioning for Anna to follow. As they walked away, the weight of the moment settled over her. She could feel the judgment in the air, but it no longer mattered. They hadn't won today, but Rachel wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As Rachel and Anna stepped out into the crisp air, the biting chill of the city seemed to sharpen the clarity in Rachel's mind. The door of Plaza Center clicked shut behind them, but the tension from inside lingered in the cold wind that whipped around them. Rachel exhaled slowly, her breath misting in the air, but her eyes, those sharp, unwavering eyes, were not clouded. She could feel the frustration building, but more than that, she felt a surge of determination, the kind that only came when the world gave her a reason to prove herself. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk, the weight of the decision already settling on her shoulders. There was something deep within her, a quiet strength that had always been there, but today it burned brighter. The slight, the rejection, the way they had dismissed her, none of it would go unchallenged. This moment, this brush with arrogance and prejudice would not be the one to define her. No, it would be the turning point. Turning to Anna, her voice was resolute, cutting through the silence that had settled between them. "If they won't welcome me as a VIP customer, then I'll take it from them. I'll buy the Plaza Center and change everything." Her words were firm, the plan already taking shape in her mind. "It will be mine, and it will be a place where everyone is truly welcomed." Anna stopped in her tracks, eyes wide as she processed Rachel's declaration. She hadn't expected this. Rachel's ambition was boundless, yes, but this was a bold move, one that would shake the foundations of everything the Plaza Center stood for. "You want to buy Plaza Center?" Anna's voice was a mix of disbelief and awe. "It's one of the most exclusive malls in the city. It'll be a battle. They'll fight you at every turn." Rachel's gaze hardened, and a fire sparked in her eyes. She didn't flinch at Anna's words. If anything, they only fueled the fire burning within her. "Let them fear," she said with quiet intensity. "I'll show them the power of change." There was no hesitation in her tone, no doubt, no second guessing. It wasn't arrogance that drove her, that the world could change. Conqueror contemplatively, he crossed the room to the fireplace, brought out several pictures and set them on the table. Rachel's gaze hardened and her hands shook before she finally closed her eyes. Rachel's gaze flashed intensity. Her fist pressed against her sides, and she wrapped her fingers around the bottle. The Plaza Center had been built on exclusivity, on creating an atmosphere that only a select few could access. Rachel had spent her life fighting against the walls built to keep people like her out. But now she had the power to tear those walls down. She could feel the momentum building, the vision taking root in her mind. This wasn't just about owning a piece of property. It was about reshaping an entire industry, one that had long been built on the idea that some people were worth more than others. Anna stood beside her, processing the gravity of Rachel's words. Despite her initial shock, she could see the fire in Rachel's eyes, the kind of fire that had gotten them both this far. Anna had always known Rachel was capable of achieving great things, but this felt different. This wasn't just about winning a business deal, this was about something much bigger. Rachel's voice softened, but the conviction remained. I'm going to make Plaza Center a place where everyone belongs. It will be a model for what the future of business should look like. Diverse, inclusive, and welcoming to all. Anna nodded slowly, her doubts fading away as she saw the depth of Rachel's determination. She had learned long ago that when Rachel set her mind to something, there was no stopping her. You're going to change everything, Anna said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and pride. Rachel's eyes shone with quiet confidence. And I won't stop until I do. Later that evening, Rachel sat in the comfort of her luxurious penthouse, the city lights flickering through the large windows as the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated her focused face. She had always preferred working at night, when the world outside faded into a blur and the only thing that mattered was the task at hand. Her fingers moved quickly, flipping through pages of financial statements, her eyes scanning the numbers with a practiced precision. The figures before her were damning. As she analyzed the reports, the numbers told a story she already suspected. Plaza Center was in deep trouble. Revenue was plummeting year after year, and the mall's once thriving customer base was dwindling. The once glorious empire was now a sinking ship, its debts piling up faster than they could be cleared. She could almost hear the desperate gasp for air as the mall struggled to keep afloat. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her mind working quickly to piece everything together. She had always been able to spot opportunities others missed, and she knew this was her chance. The Plaza Center may have looked pristine from the outside, but behind the polished facade was a sinking vessel, desperate for a captain who could steer it in the right direction. And Rachel was about to step in. Her lips curled into a small smirk of satisfaction. The more she examined the figures, the more she realized that her instincts had been right. This was a prime opportunity. The Plaza Center, in its current state, was not long for this world. The wealthy investors who had once flocked to it were now turning their backs, and the exclusivity that had once made it an elite destination was now a weight dragging it under. The mall had become a relic of a bygone era, one that didn't fit into the shifting tides of the modern market. A sinking ship, just waiting for the right person to take control, Rachel muttered under her breath, her voice laced with quiet triumph. She didn't see the failure as a setback. She saw it as an opportunity, one that was about to become hers for the taking. She knew how to turn things around. She had done it countless times before. The path forward was clear now. Rachel would acquire the Plaza Center, not just for the sake of ownership, but for the chance to reshape it into something entirely new. She envisioned a place where people of all backgrounds were welcomed, where exclusivity would give way to inclusivity, and where the future of business would be redefined. It would take time, and it would be a battle, but Rachel had the resources, the intellect, and the vision to make it happen. As she leaned forward, studying the numbers one last time, Rachel's mind raced with the possibilities. She knew what needed to be done, and nothing was going to stand in her way. The Plaza Center's fate was sealed, and Rachel was ready to claim it for herself. Over the following weeks, Rachel's team worked relentlessly behind the scenes, each member contributing to the strategic acquisition of Plaza Center. They moved quietly, discreetly purchasing shares from small investors who were eager to cut their losses. These investors, once hopeful of Plaza Center's success, had become disillusioned by its decline. Their anxiety was Rachel's opportunity. She knew that by carefully accumulating their shares, she could slowly increase her influence over the mall's future. As the days passed, Rachel watched her stake in Plaza Center grow. Every small transaction, every piece of the puzzle falling into place, brought her closer to her goal. But acquiring the smaller shares was just the beginning. Now came the more delicate task: convincing the larger investors to sell. The heavy hitters, the ones who had once believed in the Plaza Center's ability to dominate the market, were still holding out hope, but Rachel knew that their dream was a dying one, and she was prepared to leverage everything she had to make them see that. Her sharp negotiating skills came into play as she made quiet inroads with the larger investors, each conversation carefully calculated. Rachel wasn't just presenting a financial argument, she was painting a picture of the future, one that would make the Plaza Center more relevant, more inclusive, and more profitable than ever before. She knew that some of these investors might resist the idea of change, but Rachel also understood the market's shift. She had been in the real estate game long enough to see the signs. Exclusivity was no longer the golden ticket. The future was in inclusivity, accessibility, and embracing a new consumer base. One evening, as she sat in her sleek office, the hum of the city's nightlife barely audible through the thick windows, Anna looked up from a stack of papers, her eyes filled with concern. Rachel had been focused on the acquisition process for weeks, and the weight of the decisions they were making was starting to take a toll on both of them. Anna knew how much this meant to Rachel, but she couldn't help but voice her doubts. "Do you really think they'll sell?" Anna asked, her voice tinged with concern. "It's a long road ahead, and you're taking a huge risk. They're not going to just hand over control to someone like you. They'll fight you at every turn." Rachel didn't flinch at Anna's skepticism. Instead, she met her gaze with complete confidence. She had heard doubt before, and she knew how to silence it. "Yes, they will sell," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "Once I have enough shares, I'll convince the bigger players that the change is necessary. The market is shifting, and they'll either follow me or be left behind." Anna absorbed her words, nodding slowly. She trusted Rachel, but even she could feel the weight of the gamble they were taking. This wasn't just about money or business. It was about transforming an entire industry. Rachel's vision for Plaza Center was revolutionary, but not everyone would see it that way right away. The resistance would be fierce, but Rachel was determined. She had seen it all before. Those who clung to the past were always left behind by those who could see the future. As the negotiations continued, Rachel's strategy grew clearer. She would make her move when the time was right, pushing the larger investors into a corner until they had no choice but to sell. And once she had enough control, she would begin the real work. The work of reshaping Plaza Center into something that was truly a reflection of the future, where everyone could thrive, or everyone could thrive. The battle was far from over, but Rachel knew the endgame was within reach. She was ready for whatever came next. The Plaza Center was about to be hers. The meeting room was tense, heavy with unspoken hostility as Rachel faced the Plaza Center's major investors. The long table was cluttered with neatly arranged stacks of documents, their sharp-edged papers reflecting the cold, professional atmosphere of the room. A few investors sat with their arms crossed, their eyes narrowed with skepticism as they studied Rachel. They hadn't expected her to be so bold, so confident, and now they were sizing her up, wondering if she could really deliver on her promises. Richard Walton, a well-dressed, middle-aged investor known for his no-nonsense approach, sat at the head of the table. His fingers drummed idly on the papers in front of him, but his eyes never left Rachel. His gaze was icy, dismissive, as if he already knew the outcome of the conversation. "We built this mall for the elite," Richard said, his voice dripping with disdain. He leaned forward slightly, the sneer in his tone unmistakable. "We can't risk tarnishing its reputation by lowering standards. You can't just walk in here and expect to turn this place into something common." Rachel didn't flinch. She knew this was coming. The old guard of Plaza Center, the investors who had seen it as a sanctuary for the wealthy, wasn't going to just hand over control without a fight. But she had anticipated this, and now it was time to make her case. A representative from her team, a seasoned negotiator, spoke up with calm resolve. "You're mistaken," he said, his voice firm but respectful. "The modern consumer craves more than exclusivity. They want inclusivity. They want a place that welcomes them, not a gilded cage. Plaza Center can lead the way if you allow it." For a moment, the room went silent. The investors exchanged glances, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Richard Walton's gaze narrowed further, his jaw tightening as he prepared to shoot back. But before he could, Rachel's voice rang out from the back of the room, cutting through the tension like a blade. "True luxury isn't in the exclusion. It's in how we treat people," she said, her tone piercing the atmosphere, filling the room with an undeniable authority. Her words seemed to echo, reaching each person at the table, forcing them to listen. "And I know this will be more profitable than you can imagine." The room fell even quieter, as if Rachel's words had struck a chord. She could see the subtle shifts in the investors' faces, the flicker of doubt in their eyes. Rachel had always known that the old ways, the ways that focused solely on exclusivity, were no longer viable. The market was changing. People wanted more than just a luxury experience. They wanted to feel like they belonged, no matter their background, no matter their status. And that, Rachel knew, was the future. She stepped forward, her voice steady, but every word brimming with conviction. "The world is changing, and Plaza Center can either adapt or fade into irrelevance. You can cling to your outdated ideas, or you can choose to lead the market, to set the new standard for what luxury should be. You don't have to follow the trends. You can define them." Richard Walton opened his mouth to speak, but Rachel cut him off, her gaze never wavering. "You think this is a risk," she said, her tone sharpening, "but I'm telling you, the biggest risk is doing nothing at all. I've seen what's coming. If you don't embrace this shift, you'll be left behind." There was a long pause as the investors exchanged wary glances. The tension was palpable. They had built Plaza Center with a vision of exclusivity, but Rachel had just presented them with a vision that felt like a lifeline, one that could save them from an inevitable decline. Rachel could see the wheels turning in their minds. They knew the market was shifting. Rachel wasn't just offering them an idea. She was offering them a way to secure their legacy, to stay relevant in a world that was evolving faster than they could keep up. As the silence stretched on, Rachel remained calm, waiting for the inevitable decision. She had made her case, and now it was in their hands. They could either accept change or risk losing everything. And Rachel knew with absolute certainty that they would choose to follow her lead. Her hearing was approaching now. She had finished reporting into the planet's center and returned home to Earth and was headed there for her meeting. But everything was in their hands. Now it was... The boardroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. The investors sat in silence, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and frustration, as Rachel remained seated at the far end of the long, polished table. She could feel their eyes on her, each one brimming with questions they were too wary to voice. They had heard her out, listened to her vision for Plaza Center's future, but there was something else lingering in the room. An uncertainty, a doubt about whether she truly had the power to back up her words. Then, with a calm that seemed to defy the charged atmosphere, Rachel stood up. The sharp sound of her heels clicking against the floor echoed through the room, commanding attention as she straightened her back and faced the stunned investors. The collective breath of the room seemed to catch in unison, but Rachel didn't falter. Her hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear that caused the shake. It was the electric rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This moment was years in the making. She had taken risks, maneuvered carefully, and now it was time to reveal the final move in her strategy. "I'm the one who's been buying your shares," Rachel said, her voice unwavering as it cut through the silence, filling every corner of the room. Her words were firm, confident, and sharp. She could see the immediate reaction on their faces, a mix of shock, confusion, and disbelief. They had assumed they still held control, that the Plaza Center was theirs to shape, but in that instant Rachel had just upended everything. Somehow this incident had gotten under control, but was now creating a barrier between them and the outside world. She paused, letting the weight of her revelation sink in, her gaze sweeping over the room. The silence stretched for a moment, the tension hanging thick as the investors tried to process the enormity of her words. Then Rachel's voice rang out again, even more forcefully this time, as if she were declaring her intention to reshape not just Plaza Center, but the very foundation of the business world they had built. "I'm the one who will transform Plaza Center," she continued, her eyes flashing with certainty. "It's either adapt or die." The words carried a weight that struck at the heart of their stubbornness, forcing them to reckon with the reality they had tried to ignore for too long. "Inclusivity is the future, and I am the future of Plaza Center." Her declaration echoed in the room, leaving no room for doubt. Rachel wasn't just proposing change, she was taking control of it. The investors, once so confident in their monopoly on the mall's future, were now faced with the stark truth. They could either follow her vision or risk being left behind in a world that was quickly evolving. The room fell into a stunned silence once more, the air thick with the realization of what had just happened. They had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted by the very person they had underestimated. Rachel stood tall, her presence commanding as she looked each investor in the eye. The battle had been fought in the shadows, but now, in this moment of revelation, Rachel had claimed her victory. She didn't need to say more. The room had already spoken for her. The future of Plaza Center was no longer in their hands. It was hers. As Rachel took full control of Plaza Center, her vision for the mall began to take shape. The once exclusive space, built on elitism and exclusion, was now on the precipice of transformation. The grand marble floors, the gold fixtures, and the luxurious storefronts that had once catered only to the select few were about to be redefined. Rachel's vision wasn't just about turning a profit. It was about building a community where every person, regardless of background, was welcomed and respected. The first step in Rachel's overhaul was restructuring the mall's operations. She introduced new training programs designed to promote inclusivity and diversity at all levels of the organization. Every department, from the retail stores to the management teams, was being reevaluated to ensure it reflected the values Rachel was instilling in Plaza Center. Hiring practices were overhauled to reflect her commitment to diversity, ensuring that employees from all walks of life were given the opportunity to contribute to the center's success. At first, the staff was resistant to change. Many of them had been with the Plaza Center for years, and the idea of altering the way they operated felt like a threat to their established way of life. There were murmurs of doubt in the hallways, skeptical glances exchanged between employees who were unsure of what this new direction would mean for them. For some, the idea of inclusivity and diversity felt like a radical departure from what had made Plaza Center great in the past. The allure of exclusivity, the prestige of being part of the elite. Rachel knew this wouldn't be easy. She understood that change, especially in such a deeply ingrained culture, took time. But she also knew that once the employees began to see the benefits of her vision, they would start to embrace it. One afternoon, as the staff gathered for a company-wide meeting, Rachel addressed the room with a firm resolve. Her voice rang out clearly, cutting through the murmur of whispers that had filled the room moments before. "We're going to do things differently here," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd of employees, who were all waiting for her to explain what that meant. This isn't just about profits. This is about creating a community. And everyone will be respected here. Her words were simple, but the impact was immediate. There was a shift in the room as employees sat up straighter, some nodding in quiet understanding. Rachel's words carried an authority that made it clear she wasn't asking for compliance. She was demanding it. But she was also offering something more, a new future for the Plaza Center, one where every employee had a role in shaping its success. As the weeks went on, the resistance began to wane. Employees who had initially been skeptical of Rachel's vision started to see the change unfolding before them. The mall began to attract a more diverse customer base, and the staff, once divided, began to bond over the shared goal of creating an inclusive environment. The new hiring practices brought fresh energy and ideas, and the atmosphere in the mall began to shift. What had once felt like a cold, exclusive space now hummed with the energy of community. Rachel's resolve remained unshaken, and as she watched the transformation unfold, she knew that the Plaza Center she had inherited was no more. It had become something new, something that reflected her belief in the power of inclusivity, and she was just getting started. A global effort by trans athletes to inspire hope and positivity and promote the positivity globally. As the months passed, Rachel's vision for Plaza Center began to take root, and the transformation was impossible to ignore. What had once been an exclusive shopping destination, catering only to the wealthy elite, was now a vibrant hub where people from all walks of life felt welcome. The Plaza Center's customer base grew more diverse each day, drawing in a wider variety of shoppers, young and old, from all cultural backgrounds and with varying incomes. The buzz surrounding the mall spread far beyond the city's borders, as word quickly circulated that this was no longer just a luxury shopping mall, but a space where inclusivity, community, and respect were at the forefront. The transformation wasn't limited to the customers. The Plaza Center's staff, once wary of change, began to embody the new values Rachel had instilled. Smiles from the staff were no longer stiff or forced. They were genuine, welcoming, and reflective of the inclusive atmosphere that now permeated every corner of the mall. Employees interacted with customers in a way that felt personal and thoughtful, no longer just as attendants to the elite, but as facilitators of a shared experience. The once aloof demeanor of the staff had given way to one of warmth and engagement, a direct result of Rachel's new training programs and the culture of inclusivity she had created. Vibrant new stores began to open in the mall, catering to every demographic. Fashion boutiques celebrated diversity with clothes that appealed to all body types and styles, while specialty shops introduced products from cultures around the world, offering unique items that were both affordable and high quality. Rachel had made sure the stores reflected the broader, more inclusive vision she had for the Plaza Center. These new stores weren't just there to make a profit. They were there to connect with the community, to serve people from all walks of life, and to provide something more than just luxury items. At the heart of this transformation was Rachel's steadfast belief that Plaza Center wasn't just about profits. It was about creating a space where every individual, regardless of background, felt valued. In a staff meeting one morning, Rachel stood before her team, her voice filled with passion as she spoke to those who had come to believe in her vision. "This isn't just about profits," she said, her tone commanding but full of conviction. "It's about making Plaza Center a place where everyone has a voice. We're leading a movement, not just a business." Whereas ex-contractors were made with care and diligence, the JFC were made to sell and affect sales power. Her words resonated deeply with the team. They had seen the shift in the mall, felt the change in the atmosphere. They were no longer just employees. They were part of something bigger, a collective effort to reshape not only a business, but an entire cultural mindset. Rachel had proven that a business could be profitable while also being a force for good. And now the Plaza Center was a shining example of how inclusivity could drive success. As Rachel looked around the room, she saw the faces of people who believed in what they were doing. The Plaza Center was no longer just a mall. It was a symbol of change, a beacon for those who believed that the future of business was about bringing people together. Months after Plaza Center's transformation, Rachel knew that the time had come to make a powerful statement, not just to her employees or the customers, but to the entire city. It was time for the world to see the true scope of what could be accomplished when inclusivity was placed at the center of business. To solidify her vision and make her commitment to change undeniable, Rachel organized a historic public conference on inclusion. The event was set to be a turning point, a moment where the Plaza Center's transformation would be shared with the world. Invitations went out to activists, former employees, and customers who had once been excluded from the mall's elitist environment. Rachel wanted to give them a platform, to let them be heard, and to show that Plaza Center was not only a place for commerce but for community and progress. As the day of the conference approached, excitement buzzed in the air, but there was also a sense of anticipation that filled the space. What Rachel was doing was bigger than business. It was about cultural change. On the day of the event, the room was packed. The energy was palpable, the air thick with emotion, as people from all walks of life gathered to hear what Rachel had to say. Activists who had fought for equality in business spaces were in attendance, as were former employees who had felt sidelined or rejected by the Plaza Center's previous management. The customers who had once felt unwelcome in the mall now filled the seats with pride, knowing that they were part of a significant moment in history. As Rachel walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. She stepped up to the podium, her posture strong, her presence commanding. She took a moment to scan the crowd, seeing the faces of people who had supported her vision, and others who had once doubted it. But now, in this moment, they were all here together, united by the belief that change was not just possible, but essential. Seeing her praises came as no shock, and to Rachel's consternation. Rachel took a deep breath, and with a voice that rang clear and unwavering, she addressed the audience. "We must confront the mistakes of our past to build a future we can all be proud of," she said, her words cutting through the stillness. "Plaza Center's legacy of exclusion ends today. Together, we can create a better world." Her voice carried the weight of everything she had worked for, the battles she had fought, the resistance she had overcome, and the transformation that had taken place within these walls. Her words weren't just a statement of intent, they were a call to action. She was asking the world to recognize that inclusivity wasn't just a lofty ideal, it was a necessary path forward for businesses and communities alike. As the crowd absorbed her words, there was a collective sense of understanding. Rachel wasn't just talking about a mall or a brand. She was talking about a movement, one that extended beyond Plaza Center and into every business, every community, and every person who believed in the power of unity. The people in that room were witnessing the birth of a new era, not just for Plaza Center, but for the world. Rachel's conviction was contagious. As she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause, the sound echoing off the walls, reverberating with the emotion of the moment. The legacy of Plaza Center had indeed been rewritten, and Rachel had proven that it was possible to create a space where everyone could thrive, not just as customers, but as valued members of a larger community. As the success of Plaza Center continued to grow, Rachel's vision for the future expanded. What had started as a single, bold initiative to transform one mall into a beacon of inclusivity had now evolved into something much bigger. The changes at Plaza Center weren't just revolutionary within the walls of one shopping mall. They were becoming a model for an entirely new way of doing business in the retail industry. Rachel had proven that a place built on inclusivity, diversity, and community could thrive, and now she set her sights on a much larger mission, expanding her model to malls across the country. Rachel was no longer focused just on Plaza Center. She had always believed that the transformation of one business could ripple out into broader societal change. Now, with Plaza Center thriving as an example, she was determined to prove that the inclusive business model could work on a larger scale. Rachel's vision wasn't just about reshaping a single shopping experience, it was about redefining the entire retail landscape. As she sat in her office late one evening poring over new plans for expansion, Rachel's thoughts were already on the next step. She had faced resistance before, but the success of Plaza Center had shattered any doubt she had about the viability of her vision. She wasn't just changing one mall, she was transforming an entire industry, one that had long been dominated by exclusivity and exclusion. And now, the doors to every mall across the country were opening in front of her. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Rachel wasn't in the business of just building malls. She was building communities. She envisioned spaces where businesses, customers, and employees could thrive together, where each person, no matter their background, had the opportunity to succeed. She imagined malls that weren't just about shopping, but about creating connections and fostering a sense of belonging. As Rachel shared her plans with her team, her conviction was unwavering. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging. Expanding her model to multiple locations would require careful planning, significant investment, and a deep commitment to her values. But Rachel was prepared for the work ahead. She had already proven that she could turn Plaza Center into a vibrant community hub. Now, she was ready to do it again, on a larger scale. "This is just the beginning," Rachel told her team in a meeting one morning, her voice full of determination. "We're not building malls, we're building communities. This is about creating a place where everyone has the opportunity to thrive." Her words resonated deeply with her team, who had witnessed firsthand the incredible transformation at Plaza Center. The ripple effect was already taking shape. As more and more people experienced the inclusivity and warmth at Plaza Center, they began to see Rachel's vision as not just an ideal, but a new standard for the retail industry. Word spread quickly. Soon, cities across the country were eager to adopt her model, and Rachel's plans to create inclusive community spaces were quickly gaining traction. Rachel's passion for change wasn't just about business success. It was about creating a legacy of empowerment, equality, and opportunity. As she looked to the future, Rachel knew that the journey had only just begun. Her vision for the future of shopping malls wasn't confined to one place or one city. It was a movement that would spread, reshaping how businesses, communities, and customers interacted with each other. And Rachel Simmons was at the helm, ready to lead the charge toward a more inclusive world. The grand opening of the new Plaza Center location was a moment Rachel had long dreamed of, a culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and an unyielding belief in her vision. As she stood on the stage, looking out over the crowd, she saw something she hadn't expected when she first took control of Plaza Center. The mall was alive, not just with the hum of commerce, but with the energy of a diverse community. The lights were brighter, the air more electric than ever before. The faces in the crowd were different than those she had seen in the early days of Plaza Center. No longer just the elite, but people from every background, every walk of life, all gathered in one space. There were families, young professionals, elderly couples, students, all kinds of people, all united by the shared experience of being welcome in a place that had once excluded them. The atmosphere was electric, pulsing with the kind of energy that could only come from a place where everyone had a seat at the table. Rachel stood tall, her heart swelling with pride as she took in the sight before her. This wasn't just a mall. It was a living, breathing testament to what was possible when people came together, when a vision of inclusivity was allowed to flourish. She had done what many thought was impossible. She had taken Plaza Center, a symbol of elitism, and transformed it into a symbol of unity and opportunity. But as she prepared to address the crowd, she knew that the true impact of her work wasn't just in the physical space or the business success. It was in the lives she had changed and the future she was helping to build. With a deep breath, Rachel stepped forward to the microphone. As she began to speak, her voice was filled with an emotion that resonated deep within her. The years of challenges, the resistance, the victories. It all culminated in this moment. "This is my legacy," she said, her voice steady but filled with pride. "We've created something greater than a mall. We've built a beacon of hope for a better tomorrow." The words hung in the air, each one carrying a weight that was felt by everyone in the room. Rachel wasn't just speaking to the crowd in front of her. She was speaking to the world. The Plaza Center was no longer just a place to shop. It was a place where people could see, feel, and experience the possibility of change. A place where diversity wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. A place where inclusivity wasn't just a concept, it was a reality. As Rachel looked out over the crowd, she knew that the impact of Plaza Center's transformation would go far beyond the walls of this mall. It was a model, a blueprint for the future of business, where profitability and purpose could coexist. More than that, it was a reminder that change was possible, no matter how impossible it seemed at the start. Rachel had proven that when people were given the opportunity to thrive, when barriers were broken down and everyone was given a voice, the results were far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. The mall had become more than a business. It had become a community, a place where dreams could flourish, where the future could be built on the foundation of inclusion and equality. As the applause filled the room, Rachel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had built something that would last, something that would stand as a testament to what one person's vision could do to change the world. She wasn't just leaving behind a successful business. She was leaving behind a movement, a legacy that would continue to inspire those who believed in the power of change, unity, and hope. And that, Rachel knew, was something that could never be taken away.